You may have seen photos or heard about this match between Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen, but you might not know the full story or what actually happened in the game. So here we go. The game was in 2004, which funnily enough was the year I was born in, and Magnus Carlsen opened with d4. So this is a blitz event, so it wasn't quite as much time, and Garry Kasparov was world champion. So we have Magnus Carlsen opening with d4, Garry Kasparov just goes d5, and we have the Queen's Gambit on the board here from Carlsen. Then we see the Slav defense come out from Kasparov, and then knight f3, and then we have knight c3 by Carlsen. Kasparov just goes e6, which transposes straight into the Slav variation, and the Slav, which is quite funny because it's Russian style of play from the Russian world champion. So guess what you come to expect at this point. So we have bishop to g5 by Carlsen, knight bd7 from Kasparov, just interlinking those knights. It's very strong structure when you have knights that are defending each other. So Carlsen just goes e3, preparing to get his bishop into the game. Queen a5 by Kasparov, kind of a tricky move. This sort of makes e5 a lot harder to play, and also just puts some tricky pressure on this knight. I think this is probably some anti-young player play from Kasparov. I doubt this is the best move in the position. I think this is just trying to get Carlsen out of his theory, because young players, they're very good at memorizing a lot of lines and good at calculating, but if you get them into these sort of open positions where a lot of things can happen or just out of their prep, the older player like Kasparov have an advantage. Carlsen was only 12 years old at this time. So we have knight d2 played by Carlsen, the best move, and then bishop b4 by Kasparov, really doubling up, ganging up on the snouting edge of the board. It's not got much help because the bishop, it's away, it's on holiday, it's outside of the pawn chain. It can't help. So we have queen c2 by Carlsen, reinforcing that knight, and then Kasparov just decides to castle because he wants to castle kingside because he's moved all these pawns. But he doesn't know where his other pieces are going to go. You know, maybe his knight's going to go here, maybe it's going to, I don't know, rotate around somewhere else, so he's going to go rook e1, rotate over to the kingside, so castling is almost the most flexible move here. So we have e takes d4 by Kasparov, and then Carlsen doesn't take back immediately. He leaves his knight hanging, so he hits the queen, which is the idea of bringing the knight back. Hitting the queen, and danger levels, so the queen's got to move, queen moves out the way, and Carlsen just takes back in the centre. So Kasparov snap takes back, hitting the knight. So Carlsen just takes back with the bishop, and it's a nice position here. You know, this bishop is quite good. The knights, although they're on the edge of the board, can sort of get activity quite well, and this knight's very useful defending this pawn here. So we have a5 by Kasparov, very aggressive, trying to expand on the queen side. And then Carlsen, principled, a4, shuts that all down. Then we have queen c7 played by Kasparov. Wants to reroute his pieces down to the king side, probably get some sort of attack going. After all, it is a blitz game, he doesn't have too much time to think, so probably played this move quite quickly. Then we have rook a e1 played by Magnus, so this is a telling move. You know, Magnus is saying, I'm going to play f4, I'm going to attack, we're going to get this kicking off. So we have h6, bishop h4, bishop d6, h3, because he's targeting the pawn. g6 is very weakening and very committal, because if they get a bishop here and he's eyeing up that square, those squares are looking too vulnerable around the king. Those light squares will just be softened up way too much of a concession to make. So knight b6, followed by bishop takes f6. Magnus spots that he has to take with the pawn in front of the king, so he snap takes that. Knight takes c4 by Kasparov, so he rotates the knight into the board because obviously it was a piece for a piece. Yeah, so takes the light squared bishop, sorry. So we have piece for piece, and then Carlsen decides to put some pressure on that strong dark square bishop. You know, this battery is annoying. It's a thorn in Magnus' side, and he thinks, if I can exchange that, I'm happy. Kasparov decides to go bishop to h2, which is quite an interesting move, because you think, well, can't I just take that or put some pressure on the queen? Well, the thing is, you can move your king because it's check, and Kasparov goes back, hanging the bishop. But the idea is, if you take, he's got to take back with discovered check, and then you either block, obviously, or move your king, and he has time to rotate the knight back. So Magnus needs to push for advantage here. Queen c5. You notice this knight's not that well defended. You know, the queen is not a great defender at all times, so Kasparov has to go rook d8 here, anchors in that knight a little bit more, but it's still kind of weak. So here we have d5, played by Magnus. Quite an aggressive move. So the idea is, from the highlighting, to take, open up the file for the rook, and that knight is pinned, ladies and gentlemen. Say that the queen moves, that's a nasty taking of the rook on the back rank, and this rook is a bit loose as well. Like, these pieces are getting overloaded, but Kasparov's wise to it, does not take. Then Carlsen just goes knight d4, trying to get another piece into the game. This knight can be very useful in maybe exchanging of this pawn, or he's going to route it to f5, but no. Kasparov goes knight f5. Now his knight is back into the game. It's not under pressure anymore. He's sort of freed himself up. But Magnus sees something here. He sees he can take first, and then Kasparov takes back, and then look how weak this pawn is. There's no pawns around it. That's what makes it weak. And also, it's completely isolated. Then we have knight takes c6 by Magnus. It just can be captured. That's what's even more weak. So rook e8 by Kasparov. So Kasparov is losing here. Magnus has a good advantage. So rook e8, trying to maybe get some pressure on his bishop, try and get to exchange. He thinks, this kid's not going to beat me in an endgame. I'm the world champion. Who even is this guy? So we have rook d1 by Carlsen, hitting the queen. And then queen e6 played by Kasparov, obviously moving the queen out of the way. Rook f1, so we have bishop b7. Carlsen decides to go back. We have knight d4 on the board, hitting the queen, hitting the knight. Kasparov decides to exchange, takes, and then Kasparov rotates the queen down. So now there's a serious threat here. Magnus's king is being threatened. There's mate and one on the board right now. So how is Magnus going to defend here? You don't want to play a pawn move. It's too committal. You weaken your structure too much. Pawns can't go backwards. So he decides to defend with the queen and offers the exchange. But the thing is, he's diluted his advantage. No, he's not attacking. The advantage was the attack and the pawn that he was up, that he'd actually press the advantage. Because you can get your rooks in the game. The queen is quite useful, teaming up with the bishop. This pawn's on a dark square. You can play on that with your dark square bishop. But then we have an exchange of the queens on the board. Magnus's pawns are now doubled. And it's now kingside 2v1. So this endgame is just basically a draw. I think maybe Magnus was low on time trying to press his advantage. Or maybe he just missed this because, he was probably under a bit of time pressure and he was only an IM at this point. That's not just normal endgame skills. But in terms of this endgame, it's a draw, sorry. And then we can keep playing it out. We've got Garry Kasparov, Magnus Carlsen. So, both of them very known for their endgame precision. So we just have to play a few more moves, trying to push this pawn up the board. That pawn's not going to get anywhere. Black's just got too many resources. He's just going to either maybe sack the bishop and he can still draw this with these pawns, the way the doubled pawns are arranged. So a few moves later, some more pawns are exchanged off the board. Magnus tries to get some play, but only a few more moves. Just rotating pieces around, and they agreed to a draw. Old versus new, world champion versus world champion. Of course, at the time, they didn't know it, but always nice to look at these historical games. If you guys enjoyed that one, there's another video here that I think you might like. Go ahead, click on that one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.